Welcome back to Sports Samurai, where my proclivity to make these videos is about the same level as Daniel Hemrick's ability to throw a football into the stands. Today I'm going to talk about last week's Coke Zero 400, and we're going to talk about the history of the race, this past weekend's race, and the strange trend NASCAR has been doing, pulling away from traditions. And is it a good idea to move this race from its traditional July 4th to Labor Day? Does the rain out handing the victory to Justin Haley make this race a farce or a fluke, and what should we look forward to in future Daytona races? Yeah, well, basically, related to tradition, there's always been, the Daytona 500 at the beginning of the year, Southern 500 around Labor Day weekend, and the Firecracker 400 at Daytona again around the 4th of July, right? It makes sense. It's the most American thing imaginable, right? NASCARs with fireworks on the 4th of July in Florida. Yeah, doesn't get much more American than that, right? This race is one of the plate races. So if you're not really familiar with NASCAR, you have 4 races each year on 2 tracks, which are called restricted plate races. Even though they don't use the restricted plate anymore, these tracks are huge. They're 2.5 mile tracks, or Talladega is a little bit bigger than that. They are fast, 200 plus miles an hour for these cars, and they are tough. It's such a strategy these races are. I always wake up really early to watch these races out of masochism for my sleep schedule and also for all the carnage that happens during the big one. It can get nuts. It's been kind of weird though, because this has always been on the 4th of July, but they're getting rid of this race on the 4th of July, replacing it with Indianapolis, moving this race to, I believe, Labor Day next year. I forgot the specifics, but it's been kind of weird. NASCAR's been bucking trends, yet bringing some back. So here's one that they brought back. They moved Darlington's throwback weekend, the Southern 500, back to Labor Day, which is the traditional day that race was always held. Yet they've been dropping a bunch of races from Southern markets, which has always been the biggest base for NASCAR. And also they added a bunch of races to, bigger markets, right? Bigger population markets that normally wouldn't, they would go to the NASCAR race for the first year of its existence and they wouldn't care about it afterwards, right? This hasn't worked well. It hasn't worked well at all. And, NASCAR has been plummeting in the ratings and they've been struggling to fill the stands. Is this a good idea for them to move this Coke Zero 400 to another patriotic holiday? I don't know if that makes sense or not, because they already have the Southern 500, right? I love me some smoothie in a carton. I think it kind of does make sense because the weather in Florida in July, it's been nuts, right? It's been really nuts. Like this weekend it rained, and back in 2015 it was rained out. 2014 it was rained out. There have been a whole bunch of different weekends that have just been suffering because of the weather in Florida during the month of July. And like I said, this past weekend's race was rain impacted. It was supposed to be on Saturday night. It got pushed to Sunday afternoon, and then, yeah. So what happened in this race, basically, it started out as your typical super speedway race. All the 3 different manufacturers had their alliances. They were trying to form together, figure out a way to dominate the race for their manufacturer. But then towards the end of the stages that they have in NASCAR, the stages were coming to a close, and then all those alliances went out the window, basically. Whoever was in the front was going to get the win. Doesn't matter who it was. And people started realizing, I can't, and I got to get these points. I have to get the points. I have to be in the front. So all those strategies sort of went out the window. So teams started making their own strategies, started hooking up with the drivers that they knew were kind of following their strategy, and it got kind of crazy. So it was unpredictable. It really was. There was good drivers in the front, bad drivers in the back, cars wrecking, and then the big one happens. Yeah, I don't know who to blame for the big one. I mean, you see Austin Dillon coming down, trying to get around the 14. He thought he was clear. He gets turned into the 14. Austin wasn't clear. And he said over the radio that he was cleared by his spotter. And this is one of the toughest parts of the track because you're farther away from your spotter, right? So he ends up getting turned and he ends up causing the big one. And it's really hard to pick blame here because it's just one of those super speedway things, right? I don't know. That's just what caused this whole thing. So during caution, it was a long caution because, 15 cars were taken out? It was crazy. It was really crazy. So a bunch of the leaders pit. So you had Kurt Busch, Landon Castle, and Justin Haley. 1, 2, 3. For whatever reason, I think it was Kurt wanted to be on the same pit strategy as the leaders. Everybody had to go one more stop before the end of the race. I have my notes here on my computer. And I'm looking at my notes here, sorry. Whatever it was, they were given a 1 to go signal, and Kurt Busch and Landon Castle dove into the pits they're going to come out like 10th and be on the lead lap and be on the same strategy as the rest of the field. Justin Haley, though. So you guys might have known, if you guys follow NASCAR, you know Justin Haley's Mr. Yellow Line, right? He passed the car for the win in the Xfinity Series last year at the same track, except he passed below the yellow line, which is a no-no for the plate tracks, right? Because they don't want cars going in the apron and cheating everywhere, right? So what happened was he got screwed big time in the yellow line with the yellow line. So well, he didn't really get screwed. He kind of put himself there, right? What happened was he stayed out. Now he's racing for a team that just started this year. They bought a charter from the now closed Furniture Row Racing, and they had really nothing to win for. I mean, Haley's third race. He's just part-time with this team. This team is basically doing R&D and just kind of making the money out of their charter. You know, just kind of hanging around, doing their own thing for this, for this race, right? And they weren't racing for anything. They just wanted to stay in the lead lap. They stayed out. They're like, whatever, right? And also, the storm was approaching. They're like, oh, okay, we'll stay out, see what happens with this storm, right? Okay, we'll probably get rained out a couple of hours, and then we'll come back and race. But yeah, you never know, right? You really never know. Because what happened was they stayed out, lightning came, they were put in a lightning hold for whatever reason that means. I guess that means lightning within 8 miles of the track, it says here. Then another lightning hold after about an hour of waiting, and then torrential rains. The race was called, and Justin Haley, 20 years old, born in 1999, I believe, won. Yeah, so this kid won in the most unlikely of fashions, right? Is this a farce? Is this a bad race? I mean, here's the thing. It was a good race. The whole race was just incredible to watch, right? There was a lot of competition, a lot of strategy, including the backmarker teams, right? They just wanted to be in position, right? So I say no, this wasn't a farce, right? I mean, Boyer's win at Michigan last year was because of a similar thing. They stayed out, they anticipated the rain, they saw what was going on, and they won in the rain, right? Boyer's team won in the rain. I believe Amarola, when he was racing for Petty, he, same thing, he won at this track in the rain. Rained so much at Daytona, God. So, I mean, here's the thing. If you're going to stay in the lead lap, that's all they wanted to do, right? That's all Haley's team wanted to do. They just wanted to stay in the lead lap, right? Avoid the wrecks and stay in the lead lap, which they did. You know, the lead lap is set by the leader. And sure enough, Haley's the leader. So it's a good way to stay in the lead lap if you're the leader, right? So yeah, it wasn't a fluke because they were following their strategy. You know, and sometimes strategies win. And that's what happens with Haley, right? So before Justin Haley raced in this race, he actually raced in 2 other races, including the Talladega race back in April, which I also stayed up to watch. And I was watching, I was like, who's in that 77 car having a good day? Sure enough, it was Justin Haley, and everyone's like, if you're in it, you can win it. And he was running like 10th at that time, and he had a great race until he got caught up in a crash. It was not his fault, right? He got caught up in the big one at Talladega, which, you know, roll the dice. That's how that race works, right? And he drives really good equipment well. Like, he's driving with Colleague Racing in the Xfinity Series, and Colleague has an alliance with Richard Childress Racing, which is really good in the Xfinity Series. I believe they just send him cars, right? It's like how Furniture Row and Gibbs raced last year. He drives these cars really well. Like, he's had a good season so far. He's a contender. He's one of those contender dudes, right? So this kid, born shortly after I discovered NASCAR personally as a kid, he won on Sunday. Jesus, I'm getting old. You know, a lot of times when these drivers unexpectedly win these huge races, and they sometimes don't perform well again. And I'm looking at you, Trevor Bayne. I applaud you for opening up a coffee shop out of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. But apparently it's doing really well. I mean, he won the Daytona 500 in 2011, but he didn't perform for shit since then. And, you know, Danica Patrick won her only race in the top level at Motegi, which was... It was actually a smaller field because that race was a split. It was raced in the same day as the former kart team's race in Long Beach. So she only had to beat like 10 people. You know, if you run halfway decent, like she did in IndyCar, you know, you'll probably win that race. But she didn't perform for crap in NASCAR. But here's the thing about Justin Haley. I don't think he'll be another boy or another. But here's the thing about Justin Haley. I don't think he's going to be another Trevor Bayne. He'll probably spend a couple more years in Xfinity before moving up to NASCAR. But, you know, he already got that win. That's already on your resume. I think he'll do well in NASCAR if he gets a good team. So that's my analysis of the race over the weekend. Let me know what you guys think. We're going to be talking about this race for a long time. We're going to look back on this race and say, okay, what happened here, right? Now, I wonder what's going to happen from here on out with the Daytona race moving into later in the summer, early autumn. Will this be better for the race? I don't know. I mean, it was better for Dega when they moved it to the fall race, right? When they moved it to autumn. It was a hell of a lot better. Except for that one year everybody just kind of hung out in the back because they didn't want to get wrecked. That was the only year that race sucked. I honestly don't know how well this race is going to do because it's the cutoff race right before the playoffs. I think it's going to be insane. But at the same time, it's going to be really crash-filled. Now, a lot of fans sometimes like crashes. Sometimes they don't. A lot of outsiders, they see NASCAR, oh, all the cars flying upside down into the fence. That's exactly what NASCAR is. That's exactly what NASCAR is. Yeah. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any questions or topics you want me to cover. I have a list of topics that I wrote down on my computer here. I think the next thing I'm going to make a video on for Sports Samurai is my favorite position players in football. Let me know what your favorite position players are if you even know what that is. Alright guys, take it easy.